Behind South Africa's prison doors are some of the most feared serial killers the country has ever seen. Men whose crimes left a trail of victims, shattered families, and nationwide shock. We're covering 4 of South Africa's most feared serial killers. We begin with a name that would soon be tied to a string of calculated killings. A young man who lured his victims with ease. His name is Sifiso Mkhwanazi, and his story is one of the shocking South Africa has faced recently.
21-year-old Sifiso Mkhwanazi has been sentenced to life in prison for the murder of 6 women alleged to be sex workers between April and October of 2022 in Johannesburg.
To people who know him, he appeared like just another young man going about his life in Johannesburg. But beneath that normal appearance, investigators would later uncover something far darker. It began to unravel in April 2022. The first woman was killed. Sifiso attacked her, took her life, and then hid her body at his father's workshop. He hid her among the vehicles and equipment. No one noticed. He had gotten away with it. And so he continued. Over the following months, between April and October 2022, Sifiso Mkhwanazi repeated this pattern 6 times. He would approach sex workers operating in the Johannesburg Central District, make arrangements with them, and bring them to the workshop. Once there, he assaulted them and later took their lives. After each murder, he concealed the body within the workshop yard, hiding his victims in different locations across the property. 6 women, 6 lives, 6 families, all gone within the space of 6 months. The victims were women who went to work that day to earn money for their families. Some of them were breadwinners. Some had children waiting at home. They were vulnerable women working in a dangerous profession, and Sifiso Mkhwanazi deliberately and methodically targeted them. Police were called to a property in Johannesburg after suspicious activity raised concern. What they found there would quickly turn a routine investigation into a major crime scene. On that property, officers discovered the body of a young woman, but it didn't stop there. As they searched further, more remains were found. For investigators, this was no longer just a murder case. It had all the signs of a serial killer. As pressure mounted, Sifiso Mkhwanazi was arrested immediately and charged. Then came the court proceedings. During the trial, Sifiso Mkhwanazi did not deny committing the murders. Instead, he offered his motive, and that was revenge. He told the court that he had been falsely accused of rape by a sex worker, that he had lost 10 months of his life in prison for something he said he did not do, and that the killings were his response to that injustice. The prosecution built a comprehensive case against him, and the evidence was overwhelming. He was ultimately found guilty on more than 20 counts, including 6 counts of murder, 6 counts of rape, 6 counts of defeating the ends of justice. On the 18th of September 2024, Judge Kasim Musa, sitting at the Palm Ridge Magistrate Court, delivered the sentence. It was devastating in its severity, and rightly so. Sifiso Mkhwanazi was sentenced to 6 life terms plus 170 years imprisonment. The judge declared him a dangerous criminal, stating clearly that the community needed to be protected from him. He was ordered to serve a minimum of 30 years before he could even appear before a court again. Number 2. Bulelani Mabhayi. Bulelani Mabhayi was born in South Africa in 1974. He grew up in the rural village of Tholini, near Butterworth in the Eastern Cape. His childhood was marked by tragedy and loss at a very young age. Losing both parents within a year of each other during adolescence left him without a stable foundation. From May 2007 to August 11, 2012, Mabhayi was responsible for the deaths of 10 women and 9 children. His method was calculated and brutal. He broke into houses at night where there were no men. He would then sexually assault his victims before taking their lives. For 5 long years, the village of Tholini lived in absolute terror. Women were afraid to sleep in their own homes. The village earned a devastating nickname, the Village of Death, and no one knew who was truly responsible. For years, police struggled to identify the killer. On May 17, 2010, police conducted a targeted blitz, collecting fingerprint impressions and saliva samples from local males to connect multiple crime scenes to a single suspect. Mabhayi's fingerprints could not be taken because he had no identification with him. After 5 years of dodging the police, the turning point came in August 2012 when a shoe print, described as abnormally large and uncommon in the village, was discovered at a fresh crime scene. This print matched footwear belonging to Bulelani Mabhayi, prompting intensified scrutiny and culminating in his arrest on August 12, 2012, shortly after the incident. Police pounced on him while he took a nap at a house in Tholini, near Butterworth, Eastern Cape. The man who had terrorized an entire village for 5 years was caught not through a dramatic confrontation, but while he lay sleeping. The saliva sample taken back in 2010 was cross-referenced and confirmed his identity as the perpetrator. The monster of Tholini had finally been unmasked. On September 3, 2013, the Mathatha High Court confirmed Bulelani Mabhayi's guilty verdict on all 36 counts. Acting Judge Noluthando Konjwa sentenced Mabhayi to 25 concurrent life imprisonment terms for the 20 murders and 6 rapes, along with an additional 625 years imprisonment for 10 counts of housebreaking with intent to murder and sexual assault. In total, Bulelani Mabhayi was sentenced to 25 life terms plus 625 years in prison. He will never walk free again. Number 3. Julius Thabiso. Julius Thabiso Mkhwanazi was born in Mpumalanga, South Africa, a province known for its stunning natural landscapes and the famous Kruger National Park. What made Mkhwanazi particularly dangerous was his use of social media. He was active on Facebook to lure young women into his web. The killings happened between January 2018 and May 2019. Mkhwanazi was in his mid-20s when the first murder was committed. His method followed a clear pattern. He would make contact with young women, arrange to meet them, bring them to his home, and then murder them. Over about 16 months, 5 young women lost their lives at his hands. After he had murdered them, he would visit the families to check how the search was going. He sat in the homes of grieving families. He ate their food. He looked them in the eyes. He pretended to be concerned. The accused was arrested in July 2019 after he was found in possession of one of the victims' mobile phone. She had been reported missing. When police discovered that Julius Mkhwanazi was in possession of her cell phone, he was brought in for questioning, and then, remarkably, he confessed. He confessed to the police by pointing out the graves where he buried the victims. When the news broke in the community of Masoyi and Numbi village, the reaction was immediate and explosive. The residents, many of whom had been searching for their missing daughters, sisters, and friends, were overwhelmed with rage. The case moved through the courts over the following years. Julius Mkhwanazi eventually pleaded guilty to all the charges of murder at the Mpumalanga division of the High Court in Mbombela. On February 10, 2022, Julius Thabiso Mkhwanazi was sentenced to 5 life terms in prison for 5 counts of premeditated murder and 25 years for 5 counts of defeating the ends of justice. The accused was sentenced to life imprisonment on each count of murder and 5 years imprisonment for each count of defeating the ends of justice. Julius Thabiso Mkhwanazi, the Masoyi monster, was a young man who used social media to hunt. He was barely 28 when he was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison. In the end, it was one of the victim's cell phone that gave him away. Number 4. Norman Simons. Norman Simons grew up in the Western Cape, South Africa. On the surface, he was just another man trying to survive. But beneath that quiet exterior was someone who, over time, would become linked to one of the most disturbing murder patterns in the country. Between 1994 and 1995, a series of murders began to unfold in Cape Town, especially around areas like Salt River. The victims were all young boys, last seen near train stations where they were lured away, and their bodies were later found near railway tracks or in isolated areas, though at first, the cases were treated separately. But it didn't take long before investigators noticed something chilling: the same type of victim, the same locations, the same method. As more bodies were discovered, panic began to grow. Parents became afraid to let their children walk alone. Communities near train stations were on edge. The idea that someone was targeting young ones in public spaces, in broad daylight, made the case even more terrifying. And as the number of victims rose, the name stuck: the station Strangler. Police formed a special task team to track down the killer. They began mapping victim movements, locations of disappearances, and witness sightings. Eventually, all signs began pointing toward one man: Norman Simons. The trial was one of the most watched criminal proceedings in South African history. Norman Afzaal Simons was found guilty of kidnapping and murder of Elroy van Rooyen and was sentenced to 25 years for murder and 10 years for kidnapping. He was convicted of just one murder out of 22. The families of the other 21 boys walked out of court without justice. In 2010, police opened the cold case and reinvestigated DNA samples taken from the crime scenes. None of the DNA found matched Simons. This was a stunning revelation. If Simons was the station strangler, his DNA should have been found at some of the crime scenes. It was not. The question that had quietly lingered for years suddenly became impossible to ignore. Was Norman Afzaal Simons really the station strangler, or had an entire community's grief been directed at the wrong man? After serving 28 years in prison, the question of Norman Simons' release became a matter of intense public debate. He became eligible for parole in July 2023 and was released on parole and under 24-hour monitoring in November 2023. The reaction in the community was one of fear and fury. Residents of Parow and Mitchell's Plain were horrified. The story of Norman Afzaal Simons is one of the most complex and deeply disturbing in South African criminal history, not just because of the scale of the crimes, but because of the profound uncertainty that surrounds them. Either he was one of the most calculated and chilling predators South Africa has ever produced, or he was convicted of a murder he did not commit, while the real killer walked free. Who do you think was the worst serial killer? Like the video, and leave your comment below. Let's talk.